She was 27 years old, a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and was struck and killed by lightning. When I saw Suzanne's body, I just knew there's something that enlivens these bodies that can't be killed. And I connected with Susan and so much more, and just opened up to another reality I didn't even know existed.
When you have spirits come through, what does that feel like?
I not only sensed them, but I saw one. He told me so many things I couldn't possibly know about him. I felt like I was pulling data out of the air.
I am excited to be joined here today with Suzanne Giesemann. This is going to be a fascinating conversation. She is a former U.S. Navy commander turned spiritual teacher, evidential medium, and author of several books such as Wolf's Message and The Awakened Way. Suzanne, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm excited. Anytime I get to talk about my passion, it's a good day.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Now, for people that aren't yet familiar with your story, you were a Navy commander, very disciplined, very mission-oriented. Then at some point, your life took a very different turn. What happened?
I was the aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on 9/11. We were in the last aircraft in U.S. airspace and turned around and came back flying over Manhattan, seeing the billowing smoke, going back to the Pentagon, where my office building, seeing the gaping hole and dealing with the death and devastation there. That caused me to really question life in general. It also caused me to retire when I hit 20 years to the date. It was clear to me I needed to live my dreams while I could. So I basically ran away from life, went sailing full time with my husband, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. It sounded like an idyllic life till life caught up to us with the death of my stepdaughter. She was 27 years old, a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and was struck and killed by lightning. She was also 6 months pregnant with our only grandchild. So I couldn't run away from life like I did after 9/11 and retiring from the Navy. This I had to face, and when I saw Susan's body in the coffin, I just knew there's something that enlivens these bodies that can't be killed. I knew it, and I set my goal of connecting with Susan somehow. I didn't know how she existed, where she existed, and I connected with Susan and so much more, and just opened up to another reality I didn't even know existed.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss, and thank you so much for sharing that. And when you say that you knew that wasn't Susan, how did you know that wasn't Susan?
I couldn't have put it into words at the time because I wasn't aware of the knowing that we had that comes from a deeper level. I was used to just relying on what I've experienced in the past, what I can sense with my physical senses, but this was this deep inner knowing that I now know comes from the fact that we are all souls, that aspect of us that knew doesn't die. I just knew it. I looked at her body. It looked so different from her because whatever it is that animates us, the soul, was missing. And I just knew it couldn't be killed. And I was right.
You have compared your journey since then, I was reading, to being in a new mission in life. So what do you mean by that?
Okay. Well, a mission in the military is we have a target, we have a goal, we're going to accomplish it. And when I realized Susan was still here, that new mission became, I'm going to connect with her, and I'm going to show my husband, who was so devastated, that she is still here. And I had just 6 weeks earlier found and read a book about mediumship. I thought it was crazy stuff, really. It was fascinating, but some of the claims that the author made just sounded fanciful to me. But boy, did that plant a seed. So part of my mission was going to be to take my husband to a medium once I could find somebody that I knew was the real deal, and see how that went. And oh my God, it just changed our whole worldview. We had an evidential reading that even my husband, a retired Navy destroyer captain, could not deny that Susan was right there with us. But you know, Timothy, what's so funny is throughout all of this, my mission was very personal for our family. I had no idea that my efforts to connect with Susan through a medium, but also through daily sitting quietly and asking to sense Susan. We call that now meditation, but at the time it was just, I'm going to sit and connect with her. I had no idea that would lead me to open up to the ability to connect with other people's loved ones as well. And I had no idea that that would lead me to a whole new worldview that's so much more expanded than what most people walk around with, but that opened me to a sense of peace and connection and love and joy and contentment that was beyond any experience I'd ever had to that point.
You mentioned the word evidential medium. You consider yourself an evidential medium. You went and saw a medium when this happened. What exactly, for people that aren't familiar, is an evidential medium? And also, I read that it took 3 years before you got a sign or a connection with Susan. Is that true? And if so, why do you think it took 3 years?
I know why it took 3 years. So bunch of questions there. First one is, I had never heard the term evidential medium either, but I heard it from a wonderful medium named Janet Nohavik, who has since passed. She became my original mentor. And I said to her, what is it? And she said, well, it's a medium who will tell you information you could not possibly know. They are going to get evidence, facts that are verifiable about the loved one across the veil. And that backs up the messages that we can't verify, such as your loved one is fine. They want you to know that they're happy and they're content. They want you to know they didn't suffer. We can't validate that. But when that loved one also tells you, I was her husband, I passed from a stroke. Okay, so maybe somebody might find those online, but could he also tell you that he always had a toothpick hanging out of his mouth? He'll tell an evidential medium that. I've had that happen to myself. All kinds of what I call gold nugget evidence that take you from doubt to knowing this is real. So evidential mediumship for me is the gold standard. Now, yeah, it took me 3 years of daily sitting and saying, Susan, show me your presence, let me feel you. 3 years till she came through so clearly. But what's amazing, Timothy, is in the meantime, I opened up to other people's loved ones so clearly that I started working as a professional medium and still had not connected with Susan. So about 2 years ago, maybe 3 now, after regularly connecting with Susan, she finally said to me, Suzanne, I held back because I know you. Your mission was only to connect with me. If I had come through in the first couple of weeks or even months, you would have said, hey, Ty, my husband, she's right here. We got her. She's okay. Now I know it personally. And I probably would have stopped the daily meditation. But in those 3 years, I opened up to other people's loved ones. I opened up to the absolute knowing that angels are real through personal experience and evidence. My whole energy field changed. It allowed me to have a more clear connection. And by that time, when she showed up, there was no turning back. Why would I stop? My world had changed completely for the better.
For someone that's never experienced this sort of thing, when you have spirits come through, what does that feel like? Is it just random? And there are people we see the movies in Hollywood, such as Ghost and different movies where all these spirits pop out all over the place. And is it like that, or what is it like?
Well, it's going to be unique to each person. We all have the capability of this. This is what's so important to share with everybody, because this is soul-to-soul communication. And the reason most of us don't sense spirits is because consciousness, the field we all share, is really, I've never used this term, checking if it's okay, dumbed down because of our bodies. It's constricted and restricted to what we sense with our physical senses until we realize there is another way of sensing, and we open up and expand our consciousness. And that's what I learned to do through Janet Nohavik. She asked me to write her book, so I sat in the back of her classroom studying how she taught mediumship. And she looked at me, she said, you're going to have an experience here today. And I thought, what, who, me? I'm just here to write your book. But at that point, I had been sitting in expanded states of consciousness daily for probably 2 years, waiting for Susan. And she calls me to the front of the room and says, there's a spirit here. What do you sense? I didn't feel anyone. I didn't see anyone, but I trusted Janet. So I just listened, and I heard cancer. And then I heard 70. And then I did see an image. a full head of white hair, but I couldn't see a person. I felt no personality. I felt like I was pulling data out of the air until this woman in the room raises her hand and says, well, my dad was 70 when he passed of cancer. I had also heard engineer. He was an engineer, and that it was a man. So yeah, that matched. But I thought, okay, what are the statistics of that? What are the odds? See how I go right to logical thinking. Meanwhile, here's Janet saying, yep, that feels right. And he's telling me his birthday was March 31st and he collected ball caps. And I said, what? You mean there is somebody here? Because I had no idea. We reenacted this scene in my documentary, Messages of Hope. It's on YouTube and Amazon Prime. So she goes, get some more, Suzanne. And I just wanted to crawl in a hole in the ground because this was so new to me and I didn't feel him. But she pushed me twice more, and I finally said, well, I just saw a pair of patent leather shoes in my mind's eye, not out here, and I heard the word twinkle toes. And this girl says, my dad was a ballroom dancer, wore shoes like that every time he danced, and my mother always called him twinkle toes. And by this time, I knew how healing a good reading with a good medium is. It shows you they're right here. There was no explaining that. Janet got a lot more details about this man. But I couldn't feel him. So I started attending Janet's classes, did a series of 3 of them, and I was getting really outstanding evidence when I would pair up with fellow students. But I didn't feel them. I didn't see them. It still felt like data. So this became my new mission. All right, if I'm getting this kind of no other explanation, evidence, this is all telepathic. And I trust Janet and other mediums I've read about that these are really people who are right here, then I need to see how far I can go with this. And I went to England to study where Janet studied, the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Sciences. And as I was crossing the ocean, I said to the spirit world, if this is real and I am meant to do this, I need to feel you. And boy, did that open up over there. It was just a 1-week class. You learn the basics, then it's a matter of doing it, practicing it. I not only sensed them, but I saw one. Timothy, do you remember, maybe you never had this experience, but there was this ride at Disney World where you would sit in a little cart and it would go through this ghost house. And when you looked at this mirror, you would see this wispy figure in the cart with you, like a ghost.
Yes, the haunted mansion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw that overlaid on one of my fellow classmates at Arthur Findlay College. I've only had 2 other experiences of seeing something similar. Because the spirits world says that's really hard for them to materialize, and I don't need it. Because now I feel their personalities so clearly, I can describe them to a T. And that's what I teach my students of mediumship, because anybody can learn. That the test of a good reading is that your client leaves and says, oh my God, that was my loved one. And the evidence and the personality does it. Not just that I say, oh, your mom had long blonde hair. Big deal. But if I could say, your mom was so picky about how she cooked and she always oversalted things. She's showing me this right now. I mean, that kind of detail where you capture their essence. And your mom says, she's saying right now, why would I go to a restaurant when I can make it just as good at home? And I'd had that happen once. And the woman says, oh my God, you've got her. You've got her. That shows real-time, real-life connection with your mom who is right here. See?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And when you say, in some instances, you see a spirit, is that like you're seeing me right now? Like we're like with your physical eyes, or is that in your mind's eye, or what people call it?
That one time in England where students of mediumship have gathered for decades, and the energy is so high that it was probably easy for the spirits to do that there. That was the only time I saw it objectively. The other few times that I've actually sensed the spirit in form was definitely in my mind's eye.
Is there a story that sticks out to you as being particularly, like it gives you chills, or it just sticks out to you as being...
They all do.
Yeah.
They all do. If you watch my podcast or doing readings, I do this all the time because I get goosebumps. We call them truth shivers. It's, when you make such a good connection and the soul lights up and it says, yeah, trust that. You mentioned my book, Wolf's Message. That's one of those stories that just stands out because Wolf was a young man, Mike Passacarnis Jr., who was struck and killed by lightning. If you watch Wolf's Message, I'm wearing the same blouse in there. As I put it on this morning, I thought that's kind of funny because I'm interviewed in the documentary, and I share the whole story of how he came to me before I did a reading for his parents. He dropped in on me in the early morning hours. So boy, that was fun recreating the bedroom scene for the documentary. But he told me so many things I couldn't possibly know about him. But some of the things didn't make sense to me or his parents. He came through in the reading very clearly. And then over the next 2 months, the things that didn't make sense came to make sense. It was like a metaphysical mystery, which is why the book is so fascinating. But more fascinating than that is Wolf absolutely left proof that he knew he was going to be killed by lightning. He knew it would happen at the base of this tree because he drew the tree and what would happen there the day before it happened. There's so many more. I don't want to give away too much of the story, but it's a story that I challenge anybody to watch without saying wow multiple times.
Wow. Well, I'll say it. I'll say wow multiple times.
Yeah.
Well, most people watching and listening to this are extremely fascinated and intrigued by this, as am I. But for anyone that's skeptic, that is a skeptic or doesn't believe in this sort of thing, what do you say to people that just have a hard time believing this?
Skepticism is very important because you can fake some things in a reading. It's called a cold reading. I didn't even know what it was till I studied it years later. And you can read body clues and build on something that somebody said before. But when you sit with a really gifted, evidence-based medium who truly has a real connection, there's no denying that something's going on here. So your soul will know that, skeptics out there. So be an open-minded skeptic. I've had people come to me and they say, I'm skeptical. In fact, my scheduling assistant once says, you have a skeptic today. And I said, okay. I don't try to convince them. The evidence will do that. It's not my job to change anybody's mind. I just share what the loved ones bring through. And then it's up to them to be open to the healing that brings. So I said, okay, I'm used to skeptics. And she said, no, she's a professional skeptic. She's the lead writer for Snopes, the people that debunk false stories. And I said, well, this will be interesting. And I connected with her. I've shared this publicly. I have her permission to share it. And it turns out her husband came through from across the veil. She wasn't there to debunk mediumship. She wanted to connect with her husband. And he came through so beautifully and showed me things I couldn't have known. And one of the things I love that they tell me is what kind of work they did. It's not necessarily crystal clear, but you can get enough that an open-minded person will know it's correct. In this case, I said, he shows me going around the country. He's doing studies. He's doing analysis. He's traveling to do this. And I'm looking at rocks. He was a geologist. And he traveled around the country taking water samples and studying rocks. I mean, there you go, right? So this was not about convincing her. And the thing is, if I try to convince somebody, that interferes with the connection. So you prove them right by trying to prove something to them. Isn't that a beautiful paradox? So all a good medium can do is trust the sea of consciousness from which all of this is arising, relax and remove obstacles and resistance, and just allow what can come through to come through. And then it's up to the skeptic. We're all on our own path.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's hard-earned wisdom, let me tell you. Yeah, because I've tried to get stuff. Like I've done readings for people who are going to write a book about it afterwards. And happily we had good connection in most of them, but one was just total bomb. And the journalist was a total skeptic and kept saying, well, why is he telling you that? Why can't he tell me this? And that's just, you have to understand the nature of mediumship.
And you've mentioned that that mediums tend to have filter, where there's a filter where not everything always comes through. Is that correct? And if so, what do you mean? Why is that important?
It's very important because the brain is the filter. Our brains are programmed to work certain ways to allow certain information through. We have to bypass those filters. Another filter is our own personal experience. If we have never had a certain experience or don't know certain information, it can't get through, because when I talked about the nature of mediumship, I was talking about resonance and coherence. That relaxing and removing obstacles is all about creating the most coherent state of being as possible. Then hopefully our client is also in a coherent state and not just tied up in knots from grief or doubt or skepticism. And then hopefully the spirits we're connecting with are also in a coherent state. When we have three coherent fields, what happens is we come into resonance with shared experiences. So I was a good decade into being a professional medium before I was starting to discern true cases of abuse in my readings, because I just couldn't go there. I was raised in a functional family. We had our challenges, as all do, but there was no emotional or physical abuse. So those kinds of spirits just weren't coming through to me. I knew about that, but I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't realize that, but I know now I was blocking that. And then through my own personal growth and releasing whatever trauma I had outside the family, now I start bringing through fathers who want to apologize from across the veil for abuse. Boy, is that healing. So I was able to finally come into resonance. But if when my second mentor, Mavis Patilla, I actually wrote her biography, fabulous medium. She has also passed. She said, she used to give the example, if a spirit across the veil is trying to get something through to their loved one, like, I know you just bought a modem for your computer. Mavis could never have gotten that because she was completely technologically illiterate and didn't even know what a modem was. So resonance is important, and anything that's not in resonance can't get through the filter.
And when it does get through the filter, what does that actually feel like? Because how do you differentiate between real information and your imagination or a fear?
And that is an ongoing challenge. I just taught a course called the Forgotten Center. So that's on my website too, where I'm now teaching how important it is to get out of your head. And I've taught this from the beginning. Wolf showed me, get out of your head and into your heart. But I've learned since then how important it is to then take what we sense in our heart and move it down to the belly, the gut, the hara in Eastern traditions, and feel how what we're sensing lands. The hara is our anchor for our connection with the body, the soul, and other souls. So when we sense something, does it dig in like an anchor on the bottom of the ocean? There's my sailing analogy. I mean, we always anchored out every night because we couldn't afford to stay in marinas. And if the anchor was dragging, you just know it. And once it digs in, yeah, there it is. We're safe now. And you do the same thing when you sense something in a reading. They pass along information, you feel it, and I always pause just a bit to sense, is this something I can trust? How does it feel? Just an example yesterday, my client gave me permission to share this. I started the reading and right away I felt the presence of a man. I didn't know who she wanted to connect with. Felt a man. I have systems how I can tell based on where I feel them relative to me, who they are. And this was right in front of me. That's a partner. I wasn't drawn over here or here, which would be mother or father, but it was a man. I could feel a little bit of personality. And then I just knew all of a sudden, you have a husband who died. Yes, and that's who I want to hear from. And I said, well, I said, he's showing me something right away, but I don't trust this. Give me a second. He showed me he loved woodworking, which is a great piece of evidence. That's going to be something that not anybody would know. But it was so soon in the connection, I was unsure, especially, this is really cool, because I had just spent the last hour in a frame shop with a guy who makes all his frames from scratch and spent the hour telling me about woodworking. So I thought, is this my imagination because I'm just filled with woodworking? Or is this spirit taking advantage of what's truly vibrating in my field right now, in my consciousness, and saying, I was a woodworker, we can use this right off the bat. So I know from experience that they'll do that because it was resonating. So once I felt it, I dropped into the belly. I said, that's what he's doing. He knows, because he was laughing now. He's like, I could feel him. He's like, say it, say it. So I did. I said, he's showing me in a very clever way that he was a woodworker. She said, absolutely. There's an art to this as well, right? Yeah, definitely. It's not all science. The science part is we're tuning into frequencies that most people can't sense because it's higher than the brain normally tunes into. But it's just a matter of shifting the channel. And anybody can learn to do that. But belief is paramount. If you say it's all BS, you're right. Belief system.
But yeah.
And your BS will get in the way.
And yes, and belief. Speaking of belief, I've had many dreams, and I believe that people can get messages in the dream state. Have you experienced that? What's your opinion and expertise on that sort of thing?
Most definitely. We can put that in the category of after-death communications. Those in spirit will get through to you in many ways. And dream states are perfect because you've dropped the barriers. You've dropped your BS. You're asleep. You're relaxed. You are radiating a nice slow frequency from the brain waves, probably theta state. Normally, right now, we're in beta state. Alpha is optimal for readings, but theta is outstanding. So the loved one who's passed can sense in your energy field, I can get through to them now. And they actually make a dream visit. When you wake up, it's so solid. You know it was them. It doesn't disappear like a regular dream. But unfortunately, they don't happen that often. I will say they are always positive and filled with love. If you get one that's scary and frightening or your loved one's in pain, that is a dream that's coming up from your own fear.
And do you believe in spirit guides and angels or this sort of thing?
I don't believe in them. I know they are real. How's that? I know it because they knew who they were dealing with. A skeptic who did not believe in angels, who did not believe in guides. The Navy commander to this point kind of goes, oh, I'm about to say angels are real and you can talk to them. Oh, I'm about to tell people we could talk to spirit guides. But they've given me so much proof. My favorite story of how I was finally convinced to believe in my spirit guide. Even saying that sounds so silly, right? It does, but that's BS, belief system. So I had sensed this guide with me. I was hearing from him in my meditations, but I just thought, am I making this up? This was back in 2008 or so. No, it had to be after 2009 because I was doing a reading for someone. And I'm doing a reading. This woman sits down, and with my eyes open, I sensed black spots throughout here. And I thought, this lady has cancer. I normally don't see medical things, but I could see it and I knew what it was. And I wasn't going to say a thing. And this guide who'd been talking to me in meditation says, say it, tell her. And I silently said, I'm not going to tell her she has cancer. And he said, tell her. So I said, I need to tell you that I'm seeing black spots in front of you here. I teach all my students, report objectively. Notice how I just said what I'm sensing. I didn't come out and say you have cancer. The person receiving that report will know what you're saying. And she said, oh yes, it's metastasized. And I said, so you know you have cancer. Now I could say it, right? Is that testing the waters? No, that's being ethical and doing no harm. If I was wrong and said you have cancer, you're going to cause somebody to be fearful. But to tell what I'm sensing allows her to perceive it in the way she's meant to. And I said, so if you know you have cancer, why are you here? She said, that's why I'm here. Why are you here? And she said, Well, I would like to know if I should have a second opinion. Now, my own personal self immediately thinks, well, of course you should. If you think you should, you should. But okay, I'm going to trust this guide who told me to tell it. And I silently said, should she get a second opinion? And Timothy, the way the answer came out, I knew it wasn't me. To this day, I remember the words. I said, well, what I'm hearing is, yes, get a second opinion, not because it will change the outcome, but because it will change the modality of treatment. Those weren't my words. And she said, okay, that feels right. Thank you. And she was satisfied. What is the point of doing a session for someone? To be helpful and healing. And that was. And that caused me to say, all right, I'm going to listen to this voice if it's helpful and healing. And it just opened up to guidance that's beyond what we normally sense here. So who wouldn't want to at least be curious and say, what if we have spirit guides? That's everybody's assignment. Be curious, be willing to be playful, and say, what if?
And if someone wants to connect with a loved one who has passed, what's your best advice for them?
Start doing my sip of the divine. Sit in peace for 3 minutes a day. I won't go into the big process. I have a YouTube video that'll walk you through it, and that will train you to start listening and quiet the mind. You will never quiet it completely, but it's a practice. And that's how I connected with Susan. I didn't realize that, number one, believing that she existed, and I knew it, and then carving out a little time every day. And the sit in peace, sip of the divine is only 3 minutes. Who can't spare 3 minutes a day if you really want to connect with your loved one? So it doesn't take half an hour, 45 minutes or more of meditation every day. People will lose hope after that. But 3 minutes a day, you're going to start bringing your right brain back online. You're going to start dampening that doubting left brain. You're going to get in a more whole brain state with just 3 minutes a day. So that's one thing. Then the other are the 3 E's of that's what I call the 3 E's of living the awakened way. I go into this in my book, The Awakened Way. But the first one is educate yourself. And you're doing that right now with Timothy's podcast. So that's great, right? Find out all about this, but dive in. Read and listen to people's near-death experiences if you want to know about the afterlife and how real it is. Watch a full reading that I did online called Actual Evidence of the Afterlife. I have 600 videos or more on my channel. Watch those and learn to open you to possibilities. Then number 2, you want to connect with your loved one? Experience it for yourself. Nothing will replace your own expanded state of consciousness and sensing their presence. They're going to come through in various ways. I have a book called Mediumship. I go into the hows and the whats and the whys in part 1. I give tools in part 3, but part 2 is 32 stories of regular people who've had after-death communications. They've experienced it. It changed their lives. Set the goal to have your own experience. But that takes educating yourself about how that might unfold. It's going to be different for everybody. And then the third E, engage those across the veil. Start talking to them more. Silently is fine. When you sense a presence, don't just say, oh, I'm making this up. Engage them. Hey, I feel you. I can't deny this is you. What do you want to tell me? That's engaging them. And now listen. And then when the human goes into doubt, oh, I made that up. Now ask them for a sign. Put them to the test. My favorite test, I did this with Susan, was tell me something about someone else in our life that I couldn't possibly know, and I'll go validate it. When you really feel that presence, when you really engage them and you know they're here, tell me something. And it'll just come up because they'll put it in your mind. And then you go check with that other person. I tell the story of my first test of Susan when she finally came through in the movie Wolf's Message. But she came through later and I tested her again. Susan, tell me something going on with your sister. And she said, well, she has low tire pressure in her car. So I checked with her sister. I said, I just heard from Susan, what's going on with your car? I didn't give her a leading clue. She said, well, the low tire pressure light came on, but that's it. And I said, yeah, that's it. That's it. I have people who've studied with me and just learned this little tool come to me all the time and say, "Oh my God, I just played the sign game with my loved one and it worked. They told me this. I can't believe it." So you don't have to be a medium to connect with your own loved ones, and it's life-changing.
What is the most common sign that people tend to experience when they're getting communication?
The most common is this knowing in your heart. It's a presence, like, I know this is them. I can tell they're here. I had a man write to me and he said, "I could ask for evidence if I needed it. I've studied with you, but because of the tools I use from you, I felt my wife with me so clearly that this 86-year-old man was sobbing like a baby." That's it. It's this knowing, a presence. So that's the most common, but then the signs can be so many, but spirits will merge their consciousness with insects, birds, animals to get them to act in ways that get our attention, like the bird that's pecking at your window, like the hummingbird that dive bombs you, like the butterfly that lands on your hand and won't go away for an hour. Those kinds of things, you can explain it away if you want to, but you're dismissing your loved one's efforts. They've told me and other mediums it's like remote control. We control their consciousness. Look how birds in flocks move instantly together. They've joined their consciousness. So loved ones across the veil can join consciousness with a bird and from their heart say, "Look, do this favor for me. Just fly over there and land right there and stay there for a while." And they do. It sounds silly, it sounds fanciful, but you just watch. I had a young man in a reading come through and he said, "I'm sending my mom owls." And she said, "No, I haven't seen any owls." I checked with him again. I said, "Okay, I know it's owls. He's showing me very clearly." She wrote back to me an email within a week. She said, "Oh my God, Suzanne, I opened the front door of the house. An owl flew in the door since the reading, flew straight up the stairs to my son's bedroom and stayed there till we had to shoo it out with a broom an hour later." There's the goosebumps. Did you get them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. You can't make that stuff up. Oh, you could, but why? You don't need to make up anything. Once you start believing and connecting and engaging, life becomes so wondrous because we're no longer stuck in this story of being only human. You're not. We're souls.
Are our souls, from your experience and your opinion, are they all connected as, whether you use the word quantum field or are they all, how is that possible that an animal or something, how a spirit can communicate through different means like that?
Yeah, because we need to stop thinking in either physical or. It's both. We are physical beings, animals and birds are physical beings, and we are, let's call it the light of consciousness. So say there's one light of consciousness and all of us are rays of that light. You can't separate them. The most easy to conceive metaphor, or is an analogy, is the consciousness is like an ocean and we're the waves. And in this physical world, what appears to be physical, we're the choppy waves at the surface. Our guides have a little less interference. There are layers, and the deeper we can go in that ocean and find the stillness where we drop the anchor, that's where we realize, whoa, those waves, that's me, but I'm here too. We're all of this. We're all expressions of this same ocean. No wonder we can connect and tune in, because it's really, we're just one. That's the really deep part, pun intended.
Pun intended. That is beautiful. And for anyone watching or listening to this today that maybe fears death or they are fearful of losing someone that they're close to, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that fear is fear of grief. But once you understand that we really don't die and this connection is eternal, that is so comforting, and it's true. And that the reality from which we arise and to which we return is so much more expansive. Please study the near-death experiences. That it's a wonder we decided to come into this experience at all, to leave that true home. So what we really fear is being alone and not having their presence around, which is comforting and loving and fun, hopefully, with those you love. And grief is horrible. Grief is the worst. And we don't want to go through that. And we fear that. But we can't avoid it. So that's where the serenity prayer comes in, right? Help me to accept the things I can't change and to change the things I can. You can accept that grief is part of loving because death is part of life. They're equal. But then change your thoughts about death. It is not a tragedy to those who die. It's a birth into a new reality, another one that's very familiar once we pass. They are fine. They want us to be fine. They want us to find joy again here. And that changing what we can change, our thoughts and our belief system, changes everything. So accept. I mean, my husband's 14 years older than I am. He's slowing down a little bit. He knows it. I know it. We have planned for it, financially and everything for when he passes. Maybe I'll pass before him. I don't know. But I no longer fear his death. I don't want it. And I will grieve terribly. But I've accepted that. You see? So that's what we're afraid of. That's why people fear dying. Okay. I just got snagged by my guides. They also said many people fear annihilation. They fear that it is just a big black curtain that comes down and that we're going to be all alone and there's nothing. Well, if there's nothing, you won't know you're alone, but there isn't. We all come from no thing. To annihilate means to return to no thing. Well, we already are no thing. We are a state of pure being. Everything else is story, narrative, experience. So once you realize you can't die, there is more, the story, the narrative will continue to arise, perhaps in a different form. That even takes away that fear.
You mentioned that accepting what you can't change. Is there a letting go when you connect with spirit?
It's all about the letting go.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you do that?
It comes as you do the practice. That's why I say you learn everything you need in a couple classes. Then you have to just learn, I'm guarding because I don't trust. But as I stop guarding and trust, I get really great evidence and feel the connection. So how do you let go? By trusting. But you have to trust to let go. So it's a jump off of a cliff. I'm going to trust that this is true, that these in spirit really are here. And I'm just going to try to tune in by letting go of all my BS and just being. Just be quiet and listen like I learned to do in that sip of the divine. You see?
We are here with Suzanne Giesemann. And where can people find your books that you've mentioned and your courses and all of this that you've mentioned during this interview? Because it's so fascinating. I personally want to check it out.
It's easy. It's just my name, Suzanne Giesemann, and happily I'm so much on the internet that even if you spell it wrong, it'll come up. And then check out my YouTube channel because I have new content every week, and subscribe while you're there so you get notified when those new things pop up. But I'm even doing live podcasts every Sunday now and answering people's questions, bringing them on screen, interacting with our community of awakening people. So I have lots of free material. I have things that do cost because they have to, but we try to find that beautiful balance. I have monthly webinars.
Suzanne, this is so intriguing, and I have questions that could go on for hours and hours, but is there anything that I didn't ask today or don't know enough to ask that you wanted to say today or that you just wanted to say?
I would like to say that the one word that didn't come up enough today is love. And the definition of love that I have gotten from those in the spirit world is lack of separation. Think about it. When you fall in love with someone, it's just no difference between you two. You love everything about them, even their faults. And then we start to notice things. But that's human love. But the love that this path brings us to is the awareness that beneath the stories, beneath the part that makes us appear different, it's coherence, wholeness. Coherence is love. And when you come to realize that that's beneath the surface of all of us, a state of wholeness, a state of coherence, you start to see that in each other. So for me, mediumship was a path to finding a greater, deeper love than I ever knew existed. It's a path for us to come to understand other people and resonate with them at a deeper level. I don't use words like I don't like them, or I don't use the word hate at all. I just don't resonate with certain thoughts or actions. And that keeps us in connection instead of saying, you're separate from me. So mediumship is a great way to heal and find comfort and to know that your loved ones who have passed are still here. But it is an outstanding path to self-realization, to realizing what the 3 principles of the awakened way are all about. And this is what I learned from Wolf. You are not only human, you are also and eternally a soul, a divine expression of one light of consciousness. You are connected to all that is through a web of consciousness. You'll start seeing the web when you open up to these connections, when you're willing to look and see and notice and trust. There's one web of connection connecting all that is. And then the 3rd principle is love is the healing, connecting force of the universe. You got to always bring it back to love, because that's why we're here. We are the ocean that wants to express itself uniquely, and it does so through each of us little waves. Why? For the experience, the fullness of it. Life, in my definition, military people love acronyms, and that's stayed with me, is life is love in full expression. So I've talked about how this path led me to this beautiful understanding and love and all that kumbaya stuff, but my life's not perfect. I still grieve. I still have my moments of being human. But knowing that I'm not only human makes all the difference in the world. We came here for the human experience, all of it. So the spiritual path isn't about suddenly being happy and joyful all the time. No, it's about understanding we came here to shine our light as source. Hopefully it's a little brighter today.
Well, I feel that it is. I really appreciate you sharing that. That is really wonderful, very positive, and I greatly appreciate your time and your insights and for being here today. So Suzanne Giesemann, and we will include all of your links that you mentioned in the description of this if you're watching this on YouTube, or in the show notes if you're listening to this today. But is there anything else you'd like to say today?
No, I feel complete. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's a joy.
In November of 2008, I had a profound personal experience. I was down to 2% chance of survival, no chance of recovery. Soon thereafter, I came back to this world. It doesn't matter if you want to call that force God, Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, Tao. But fact of the matter is, it's a very real force. The scientific evidence proving the reality of the afterlife is beyond dispute already. Remote viewing has been scientifically demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt. Precognition is real. These are forms of non-local consciousness. We're all eternal souls in this beautiful game of life, and we come back again and again, all towards that same process of coming towards oneness with the divine, love, kindness, compassion, coincidences, synchronicities. These are very powerful concepts that defy materialist causal explanations, and yet they're real.